I'm been really looking forward to this. We, like we said last night, have been talking about this for a long time, and I basically had carte blanche to talk about anything that I wanted to talk about. And I told these guys, is there an opportunity that we could talk about meaning? And I think just as trusting friends, we're like, yeah, sure. But I think without having a really deep conversation about why it is that we're doing this, without really analyzing what your story is as a health professional, I don't like your chances of being able to do this long term. So we're going to break this down in a few different ways. We're going to talk about why meaning is so important. We're going to delve into how you might craft a better story for yourself. And then we're going to leave here supercharging that concept so you have something to refer back to, and it's not just a fun conversation that we have amongst peers. Does anybody need a pen? This little, oh boy, this little book that you have is a place that you'll take some notes. There are some things in just a sec that we will write down. So if you do need a pen, it's up here and available to you. But to kick things off, I wanted to start with a story.
One more. Thank you.
Pretend that as a group of professionals, we're not here in Austin, Texas, but we're in Austria. Okay, can you go there with me? Think just for a sec that we're not in an amazing fitness facility, but we're in like a lecture hall. And we're not fitness coaches, we're PhDs in psychology. Okay, can you picture that? Can you pretend just for a sec? And instead of me, imagine in walks this white-haired, hunched back, bespectacled professor. He's got the classic tweed jacket on. He's got the Oxford button up. And he writes on the board what he's going to talk to you about. Now, instead of meaning, he writes on the board suicide, annihilation, sexual education. And you're like, what is going on? Like, what is this conversation going to be about? And he starts by saying, hey, before we get into this stuff, we need to talk about meaning. To speak of these topics, we have to talk about the value of life. And as guys that have studied that, you're like, okay, I can get down on that. And so you're sitting there listening to what this guy has to say. And the next thing out of his mouth, though, is a little shocking. The next thing out of his mouth, he says, joy cannot be pursued. Happiness cannot, should not, and must not be the outcome. It can't be the goal. And you're like, what's happening? Like, what could this possibly be referring to? And he goes on to say that meaning can be found in three different ways. Meaning can be found through doing. That means when you're in pursuit of some goal, when you're on some mission. This guy up there speaking said that's an excellent way to ascribe deep meaning to the story that you're walking out. He also said experiencing. That means by loving, supporting others. And so far, are you tracking with all that? We're tracking until he says this very last thing. He said that meaning is found through suffering. And you're like, wait, what? It's like the record scratching, right? The song stops, and you're like, how could that possibly be a part of this conversation? And he goes on to say the true suffering of an authentic faith is an achievement, and indeed, it's the highest possible achievement. Now, we pretended like we're here, but what I'm about to say really happened. The crowd starts to go into a frenzy because this guy speaking is just an academic. And so they're thinking in their head, how could this Yahoo possibly say something so audacious is that suffering equals meaning? And so somebody raises their hand and he calls on him. And he says, how could you possibly speak about that? You're just an academic. And without a word, he takes his jacket off and he rolls his sleeve up and he shows the Auschwitz concentration camp number of the tattoo he received as a Jew being in prison during World War II. And he goes on to say that suffering doesn't equal meaning. And here's the punchline. Are you ready for it? But meaning is a way to get through hard things. And so I leave with that story, one, because I just think it's a badass story. Two, if you're familiar with your history, this guy's name is Viktor Frankl. He wrote a book, and it's my favorite book to give. It's called Man's Search for Meaning. He's the father of logotherapy. And he battle-tested all of these ideas while he was in a concentration camp. And so instead of coming up with ideas and then testing it, he was put into a situation of immense suffering, and he had to figure out how to ascribe meaning to it. Now you might be wondering, like, why are we talking about that? Well, he gave us a blueprint of how we can tell a better story with what we're doing professionally. Everyone in here, I imagine, has a story that has some parts that sound like this. I love fitness, and so now I'm a fitness professional. Am I right? I mean, it would be weird if you didn't. And I think that we got into this profession, and I'm making a big assumption, because there's parts of it that are awesome, right? There's parts of it that are really romantic compared to accounting or, I don't know, being an engineer. But could we also agree that there's parts that make this job really hard? There's parts that make it very challenging to do this day after day and week after week and year after year. But I'm here to tell you that of all the guys I can picture, these two guys in the corner and lots of other guys who have been doing it a long time, they all have one thing in common. And that thing in common is that they've been able to ascribe a really deep meaning to what it is that they're doing. And that's what we're going to try to accomplish together as a group. Sound good? Now, one of the words that I like to describe purpose is passion. But when I say passionate, it doesn't mean like you're psyched about fitness. The real meaning of the word passion is suffering. The Passion of the Christ isn't a story about some guy that was super interested in exercise and so he opened up a gym. The Passion of the Christ is about suffering for something you believe in. Amen? I say that in fitness, we should expect there to be challenges. You're not a victim. Nobody forced you to become a coach. But I think the reframing is that you recognize that the story you're about to weave is not really about you. And I don't think that it should be about you. So you got this pen and you got this pad. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to go through an exercise called expressive writing, and it's free flow. I'm going to set the clock for 5 minutes, and here are your instructions. You have permission to feel. No one's going to see this. I'm not going to reach over and peek on your shoulder. This is just for you. Your prompt is, how do you feel about coaching today? Do you feel burnout? Do you feel tired? Do you feel motivated? Did you just start? And so the world is your oyster, and there's only potential. Whatever it is, for 5 minutes, I want you to write that down. There are no punctuation, no editing police. Just let the pen flow, and for 5 minutes I want to see your pen move. On your mark. 3, 2, 1, go. Great job. Now when the pins stop moving, I know you're ready to move on. Some of you guys, I can tell this comes naturally for you. It's not the first time putting a pin to the pad, which is awesome. And look, the whole reason that we're doing this is that it's the foundation of anything that you want to do. You don't have great sales. If you don't nail this, and it's going to be hard to really believe the things that you're saying. If you want to be a part of a team and you don't know why it is that you're doing this, and it's going to be really hard to jive with the other people that you're working with. So I believe that long term, you have to believe that you're doing something profoundly impactful, because what else is there? You're either on this epic quest to save souls and transform lives, or you're just paying for a long-standing exercise habit. Now, every time I've done this, and I've done this several times with coaches, I've found it's actually not that hard to get a group of studs to come up with something that feels pretty epic. And I have a theory. I think the reason for that is because we have these own stories ourselves about why we're really here. Sure, like we said in the beginning, all of us like exercise. There's something about this that we all really vibe with. But if you're like me, there was a, dare I say, transformational experience by getting into fitness. It wasn't just about lifting weights. It was about something bigger. Can you relate to that? Do you have your own story there? I figure that you do. Fitness, and this is the part where we can dream a little bit, right? And it's a little bit of a stretch. Fitness, I think, is a catalyst for change in other parts of your life. I can remember the first time in my life that I felt respect for myself. It was at a very fancy restaurant, 2002. I was with my whole family. It's called Chili's.
Is that spelled with an I at the
It
end?
is, yeah. You've heard of it. Yeah, it's like 2 or 3 star Michelin, I'm not sure. Anyways, we're there as a family. Now, I got 4 little brothers, I got an older sister, and we were there as a crew of 8 people. And the moment that I felt respect for myself for the first time ever is where the chips and queso came out, and I said, I'm good. Now, that may not seem like a big deal to you, but I had somewhat of a reputation in my family that if chips and queso came out, I was going to put on a show. I was going to embarrass them a little bit by how much I would eat. But you see, what my family didn't know is this was the first time that I had rules, that I had discipline, that I had some framework around eating. And so the decision to say, nah, I'm good, was met with hostility by my family. For real. They were like, what are you doing? You're the guy that eats all the chips when we come to eat this meal. But there were things that had nothing to do with that decision that started with fitness. For me, it started with Body for Life. Do you remember this book? Right? It's a seemingly insignificant book to most people, but for me, by just reading these pages and by doing these really simple things like a body part split workout, which I had never done, and having 3 Mileplex shakes a day, follow me here, that led to having discipline, which led to commitment, which led to self-awareness, which led to self-respect. If you've seen the show The Bear, have you seen the show The Bear? Has anybody seen that show? You should go watch it directly after we finish today, because there's an episode where cousin, Richie is the character's name, he says, I wear suits now. And it's like this declaration that, hey, this person that I was before is not going to be the person that I'm going to be moving forward. And that was my cousin Richie moment, and I share that with you because I was not the same person after I left Chili's. And I've never been the same person. I imagine you have your own story, and then if you reverse engineer it, there's something where fitness and exercise was the catalyst, but it was a much bigger story when we get into the details of how maybe you yourself went through some type of transformation. And so here's where I share that. To reverse engineer your experience or my own, it's complicated. It's complicated because it didn't just happen on the gym floor. That was important, but there were other things that led to that point. And so I believe that if you want to find meaning as a fitness coach, you're going to have to expand the territory of conversations that you're willing to have with people. Now, all of us here are pretty skilled. From a fitness standpoint, there's a map. There's a sheet of paper that we could put all the information that we know. Sets, reps, CrossFit, breathwork, sauna, cold plunge. Everything that has to do with physical performance, we could put it on a sheet and we could say, this is the map for your physical fitness. But the map is not the territory of what it takes to transform people. How do we know that? Because you can get somebody in really good shape and they could still be an asshole, right? You could get somebody in tremendous shape and it might accentuate other parts of their life that are in dysfunction. So to try to connect the dots between what Viktor Frankl said and what we're illuminating right now is that for you to tell a better story, you're going to have to be willing to step into an area that you're scared to talk about. You're going to be having this moment where your client is going to say something and you have to make the decision to say, I'm here for it. Making that step doesn't mean that you have to be an expert. And that should be the biggest breath of fresh air. Unlike fitness, where we're saying like, hey, you need to know your shit. You need to know sets and reps and all the things that go on that piece of paper. To have the courage to step into other conversations does not require you to be an expert. It requires you to be a willing participant in dialogue around something that could be paramount to their transformation. Now, that thing that I just said might have blown your mind, or it could be something that you've been thinking about for the last 10 years. Wherever you're at on that spectrum, I've also been thinking a lot about that. So I hope that what I'm about to say is just a helpful way of looking at the territory, but I don't want you to take my word as like the only way that you can go about it. At BPR, we think of these transformational conversations in 6 different areas. Obviously, performance is one. And it's probably the biggest conversation that you'll have. It's where the most amount of time will be spent. But there's also conversations around nutrition. There's conversations around recovery. That's pretty well established. And that's nice, right? Because what I'm talking about has already been done. It's very commonplace that in our space, people will say, yeah, we're going to speak about nutrition. But that wasn't always the case. When we first started, it was very weird to talk about anything except for 3x12, right? To talk about macronutrients or ratios, that was really weird at some point, and now it's commonplace. So like Charlie said, I believe what I'm about to say will at one point be commonplace. So we have performance, we have nutrition, we have recovery. We also need to talk about stress management. That's its own specific category. We also need to talk about relationships. We're social beings, and so without dialogue around how you're being supported there, there's a chance that you might miss out on the transformational aspect of that. And then lastly, psychology. When I say psychology, a lot of times people's skin crawl, but it doesn't mean that you're going to talk like you got a doctorate. It just means that you're going to talk about the things that are going on in between their ears. You're going to ask questions around, hey, how you feeling? Just like we did. And just opening the door to that potential is all I'm asking for today. What we're doing is providing some type of map, some type of territory again, that our clients could look at. And you say this, hey, is there anything here you want to talk about? And they'll be like, nope. And you'd be like, cool. I'm not going to go any deeper than you want to go. But if they can see those words and be like, stress management. You know what? I am really stressed out. And you just say, well, tell me more about that. It's as simple as that. But by giving some type of visual, or even just giving clients an awareness of where they could potentially go with you, can just open the door to demanding that a transformation happens more closely than if you just had access to sets and reps and workouts. For me, that 3x10 body part split and myoplex shakes led to better sleep. It led to less anxiety in social situations. It led to better self-confidence and awareness. And it led to better goals. What I'm about to say, I don't want to offend you with this. But I think you could be the best coach in the world at coaching a great group class. Your playlist could be flawless. You could be the best at verbal, visual, and tactile cueing. You could navigate the entire class with multiple passes at each one of those clients. And you could dose them with the best workout they've ever had in their life. But I don't like your chances of demanding that their life's going to be changed. So think about that. Now, right now, if we could pause, I imagine there's two things going on in your brain. It's like, what did Jeremy and Charlie give this guy permission to do? What are we talking about? And that's fair. I'm hoping there's another part that says, you know what, he's got a good point. Having like a good basis of meaning to back me up as I come in to the 5:30 a.m. class and I'm coaching, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And if you have those two competing voices inside your head, I would say welcome. I have those too. I've been thinking about this for a long time, and there's a big part of me that feels like an imposter even just talking about this stuff. There's a big part of me that says, man, how could I possibly talk about things that I don't have a doctorate in? How could I possibly be brave enough to have these conversations? But then at the same time, it's like, I want my story to mean something. I want what I do to be really impactful. So because it's the holiday season, I thought that we would do something in the Christmas spirit to wrap it up. Does that sound good? I believe Christmas is about the Christ who came, but if I'm honest, my favorite story around Christmas time is Christmas Vacation. No, it's the Christmas Carol. It's the Christmas Carol. Now, we were talking about this last night, and I thought that everybody knew this story, but if you didn't grow up in America, there's a chance that maybe you don't know this story. So humor me just for a sec, and then we're going to do another little exercise. The Christmas Carol is about a character named Ebenezer Scrooge. He goes to sleep, and against his will, that's an important part, he's visited by three spirits. He's visited by the ghost of Christmas past, he's visited by the ghost of Christmas present, and he's visited by the ghost of what's yet to come. Are you familiar with this story? If you're not, those first two spirits, the first two ghosts that visit him, potentially while he's asleep, while he's awake, they make him sad. He looks back at what his life once was, at who he once was, and he feels sadness. The ghost of Christmas present shows him things that he's blind to in his current life. But the third ghost scares the shit out of him, right? It terrifies him. So much so, here's the punchline, that when he wakes up, he decides, fully conscious, that he's going to become a different person. So right now, I'm going to give you the opportunity to feel that. If you've never done this, it's a little bit of a visualization exercise. And if you've never done something like this, it's called the Dickens process. It can be tough, but transformational. Now you have something that you previously wrote. So I want you to take a look at that paragraph now. And I want you to look back at how you feel about coaching. And in that paragraph, there may be something that feels like a limitation. You can look back and write one limiting belief or behavior that you want to stop. This could be something in regard to your approach to being a professional coach. So here's some examples. I'm not knowledgeable enough to coach my clients fully. I can't balance my own health while coaching others. I'm afraid of charging what my services are worth. There's no way I can have a conversation about mindset or psychology with my clients. So once again, I want you to write it out below that paragraph. Maybe it's something that you're distilling from what you previously wrote. Maybe it's something new, but I want you to be honest. Previously when we said, hey, we had those two competing voices, part of it was doubtful, part of it was like, what are you guys talking about? I want you to write something that feels like a limiting belief down on your paper. Anybody confused? Awesome, go for it. Got something that probably didn't feel great to write? Here we go. Try to set your pen and pad down, get a little comfortable. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes and we're going to walk through something together that you're just imagining in your brain. You up for that? Take a couple of deep breaths. I want you to think of that sentence that you wrote down, that you know is holding you back. What is something you believe about yourself, your abilities, or your impact that isn't serving you very well? How does this belief make you act in your daily life and with your clients? Now, right now, I want you to think about the immediate consequences you have of holding that belief. How does it make you feel today? How does it limit your ability to show up for your clients? Okay, now with that thought in mind, I want you to pretend like we're with the ghost of Christmas future and we've instantly fast forwarded 5 years into the future. Imagine you've held on to that belief for 5 years. See yourself 5 years older, still living out that belief. What happened to your coaching, your relationships, your health, your fulfillment? What do your clients miss out on because of your hesitation or lack of confidence? Now, bam, we fast forward 10 years into the future. How old will you be? If you've done nothing to change, how much will that belief cost you? How much regret do you feel? What have your clients' lives been like because you didn't fully step into your potential as a coach? What did they say about your impact or lack thereof? Now, fast forward 20 years. How old are you? You're 20 years older than you are right now. You've allowed this belief to dominate your entire career. See yourself now. What have you become? What opportunities have you missed? Who have you failed to serve? What do you feel in your body, in your heart, and in your soul? Look in the mirror. What do you see? Feel the weight of that regret. Hear the disappointment of those you've let down, including yourself. Now open your eyes and take a deep breath. None of that's real. None of that's real. Take a deep breath and blow that crap out. That's the voice of Christmas yet to be that isn't real. And so thinking back to that paragraph, you have a choice right now. There's those two competing voices in your head. You have the ability to tell a better story right now. That story doesn't have to be those things that I talked about. It could be one thing. It could be the thing that you're interested in. But I want you to, right now, write out what the new belief or behavior is that you want to adopt and transform your future. Write it down. If you knew you were capable of making a profound difference, what would you write down? What would you believe about yourself? Here's some examples. I don't need a PhD to care. I'm a coach who's constantly learning so I can serve my clients at the highest level. I show up every day, no matter what, ready to serve. Write the thing that is the thesis of your story. Write the tagline that if we're watching this movie of your life is the plot. This is what's on IMDb. Don't be too critical of yourself. This is just a draft. Like any good writer, stuff that we put on the paper first is usually not the final product, and that's okay, but just getting something down is a great first step. So everybody got something? See some pins still moving? Just let it flow. Get it out there. Everybody got some sentence, some image of something that's important to you, yeah? Okay, cool. Last thing that we'll do, close your eyes one more time. Let's make it fun now. Imagine you've embraced that belief, that narrative, that thesis, that plot line for 5 years. See yourself committed. You're on a mission. Nothing can stop you from fulfilling that thing that you wrote down. How have your clients' lives changed because of you? What opportunities have come your way? For just a second, we don't do this often enough. I want you to feel the pride of living into exactly what you said that you would be. Take just a moment to embrace how good that feels. Now fast forward 10 years. You've lived this belief for a decade. What kind of impact have you had? How do your clients, after 10 years, speak about you? I imagine it's with great reverence and in hushed tones because of what a badass you are. What do your family, your friends, your colleagues say about your growth and your ability to influence? Now, last one. Let's do it again. Fast forward 20 years. Think how different it feels after 20 years of being that dude. You've lived fully aligned with this new belief. What legacy have you created? How many lives have you transformed? How good are you at what you do compared to today? You're a black belt at this stuff that we're talking about. How fulfilled do you feel knowing you've lived a life of purpose and impact? Open your eyes, and right now, I want you to write 3 actions, 3 things that you'll do right now to become that dude. Write 3 things that if you're brave enough, you'll do it right now. Make it something that's within your control. Make it something that you're responsible for. Is anybody brave enough to share one thing that they wrote down? One action? One thing that as you do that, you're like, I am that dude. Safe place. I tell you what, if anyone is brave enough and they speak up, we're going to cheer for them with whatever they say, like they just scored the winning touchdown and Remember the Titans. Are you up for that? If anybody's ballsy enough to speak up, Mar. Okay, hang on. Are y'all ready? Because whatever she says, we're going to stand up and cheer for her like she just won the Super Bowl. What do you got? She's going to raise her prices. Guys, let's give her a hand. Yeah! Ah! That feels good. Anybody want to follow that? Give me one more. Give me one more. What do you got? Be ready. Everyone be ready. Be ready. Be ready.
We're going to celebrate their small victories.
Yeah! Oh, that feels good. One more? Any?
I'll go.
What do you got?
I said I'm going to lean on my team and ask questions.
Yeah! All right, all silly goosing aside, here's your homework. Don't lose sight of that sentence. You got a draft. You probably need to craft it. If you weren't willing to share, well, it probably needs a little bit more work. Step 2, I want you to share it with someone that you work with. One of the greatest ways to weaponize anything that you write is to tell somebody else. So at some point, be like, hey, remember when you said you were going to raise your prices? When is that going to happen? So you got to craft that statement before the day's over. Tell somebody that you work with what you wrote. And then lastly, just do the things that you said you were going to do. That's it. I got tired of coaching the air squat in 2009. But this stuff that we're talking about right here, crafting a deep meaning and purpose about how I could have an impact in somebody else's transformational story where they might say, I wear suits now. I will be doing as long as I live. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you guys, and I can't wait to spend the rest of the day with you.